Hi, everyone. My name is David Bradshaw. I'm the Assistant Director of the Graduate Center unit of the Graduate College. We support graduate student professional development needs across the gamut, whether it's mentoring, wellness, multiple career pathways, funding support, writing, you name it, we're probably involved in it or know who's doing it and can connect you to it. I'm really excited to have Earl Lee, Director of Training Initiatives in the University of Arizona's Office of Diversity and Inclusion with us today. Earl will be covering the topic of combating imposter phenomenon, strategies for awareness and confidence. Also, imposter syndrome and imposter phenomenon are synonyms of each other, which Earl will get into more. Earl, I'll let you take on over. Thanks so much for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. As David said, my name is Earl Lee. I use the pronouns they and them. I am the Senior Director for Inclusive Learning, Engagement, and Leadership in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion here at the University of Arizona. I really enjoy always doing these sessions with the Grad Center. They're always really fun. And today's topic, we're going to cover imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. Hopefully everybody is seeing my screen that says combat imposter syndrome, strategy for awareness and confidence. So as we get started, feel free, just some logistical stuff for folks. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will get to those towards the end of the conversation. We're going to spend about 25 minutes or so at the upfront is having this conversation. I'm going to share some slides and some information with you all about imposter syndrome, how it works, how it shows itself up, and then towards the end, we're going to stop sharing screen and then we're going to have a dialogue where you get to ask questions and I'll also answer the questions that you all pose as well. So again, feel free to write questions in the chat as we go, but we'll also answer questions towards the end. Perfect. So let's see if this screen will work. Today's agenda, we will define imposter syndrome. We're going to learn about different ways that imposter syndrome show up. We're going to also understand how structural and or societal factors affect someone's perception of self. So oftentimes, and I will talk about this, we will see the definition of imposter syndrome. Oftentimes it's about you as a person, but we're going to talk about some of the structural issues that also exist to continue this imposter syndrome cycle. And then finally, we're going to discuss some strategies to address imposter syndrome for yourself and others. So here's a little reflection for folks. I want you to think about a time when you were at your best, you felt your best, you did something so amazing and so wonderful, and you knew it was great, you knew it was amazing, you knew that no one could tell you otherwise. It was so spot on that it was like beyond excited. I want you to think about that time in your life. I want you to write it down if you have to. Keep that same thought as we go through this presentation. You will need that inspiring energy, okay? So keep that at the back of your head. Again, that moment when something happened in your experience and it was so good with it, you did a presentation and the presentation was so fantastic. You presented at a conference. You got into grad school. Whatever it is, just keep that moment in your head. I'll write it down if you have to. So one of my favorite recorded artists, Beyonce Knowles Carter, once said, "Your self-worth is determined by you. You don't have to depend on someone telling you who you are." This quote not only sits currently on my screen, but also hangs in my office because I believe so much in this in the statement here. Your self-worth is determined by who you are, and is determined by you, not somebody else, but by you. So no matter what other people might tell you or think about you, it is you who help to determine your self-worth. And that's some of the things that we're going to talk about today. There are some societal things that happen around us that kind of tells us, oh, you should be this way or that way. At the end of the day, you have to make that conscious, self-aware decision to be you and do you. As for folks who are familiar with the cult classic, and I think you can call it the cult classic now, from Mean Girls, when it says "You do you, Glen Coco." So this is the energy that we have to think about as well, coupled with this quote. Okay. So defining imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is the belief that one's academic or professional accomplishments are not due to their capabilities, involves feelings of self-doubt and personal incompetence. So when I see this and you dissect this, I want to think about it's a belief, right? It's a belief that like what you have accomplished, remember that moment we talked about, that belief that you did something so amazing, so great, so grand, but you're like, was that like an error? Was that luck? Did I just fall into that accidentally? You start thinking about those things when you think about imposter syndrome. You start thinking that whatever happened was not because I was great, was because it was just mere luck. But no, it was because you were great, because you did something, you worked really hard to get where you are. But if that imposter syndrome starts to seep in, you start to doubt yourself. So one of the things I like to bring up when we talk about kind of the history and understanding imposter syndrome is that, did you know that imposter syndrome was believed to only affect professional women? So when imposter syndrome, the research started, it was focused on women. It was focused on only women are affected by imposter syndrome and nobody else is. And in one such study, they looked at 1,326 women in academia, and they said only 5% had low imposter syndrome characteristics. It means that only 5% didn't really feel like they're imposters. 29 had moderate, 46 had frequent, 20 had intense imposter syndrome characteristics. So even if you look at the bottom two numbers together, the 46 frequent and the 20 intense, 66% of women in this study said that they were having frequent imposter syndrome characteristics. 2/3 of the women in this study. So you can understand how people are like, well, it's only females and women feel that way and everything else is great with everybody else. Well, that is not the case, because a later study that was done showed that 70% of successful people reported to experience it. And when they were talking about thinking about successful people, they were looking at folks who are in the C-suite. For those who are not familiar with the C-suite, we're looking at folks who are chief executive officer, chief operating officer, chief marketing officer, chief IT officers, folks who were in those kind of upper level positions who tend at the time when this study was done to be mostly male, were also experiencing imposter syndrome. So it wasn't just a woman thing, it was everybody was experiencing imposter syndrome, that feeling, that internalized belief that your success is due to luck or some other external factor rather than your skills, your intelligence, your qualifications, your hard work. In a later study, we learn about the different types of imposter syndrome. And this study was done by Dr. Valerie Young, who looked at the 5 different types of imposter syndrome. They are the perfectionist, the natural genius, the rugged individualist, or some people like to call them the soloist, the expert, and the superhero. So there's 5 different types of imposters, or 5 different ways that imposter syndrome shows up in how you operate and how you create and feel, and what we call different traits, right? In this graph, who's a little bit more blurry once you blow it up big. I'll definitely send us a better version when I send this to David, so you can see a much clearer version of this and some other options for it. But the perfectionist says to himself, I should have done better. Mistakes are unacceptable to me. I am perfect. I am great. I am supposed to be I'm supposed to do everything just right. And so what we see is that the perfectionists, some of the characteristic traits that they hold, that they're always holding themselves to the highest standard. That can be really good, right? Especially as a graduate student, you want to achieve the best, you want to be great. But that can also be problematic if that never ever happens and you keep feeling that you're not good enough. You start to internalize that feeling to where it becomes a chronic issue for you. Another characteristic of somebody who's a perfectionist is that sometimes accused of being a micromanager. And sometimes even after delivering a successful presentation, you still kick yourself because you forgot one minor detail. Now, listen, you might go through this presentation, you might see some minor details in it that I may have missed. I guarantee you I'm not kicking myself afterwards, because sometimes those things happen. You are typing really quickly and you type over for an I because they're right next to each other on the computer. Or you transpose number because 1 is next to 2 and 3 is next to 4, not really, but 3 is next to 6. So you make those mistakes, and it's okay when that happens. It's just about how do you then say to yourself, okay, this happened, I need to move on. One of the articles that I read says that when you are feeling like the perfectionist, one of the things you can do is use it's called a GEQ model. It's good enough quality, right? Did what you do, was it good enough quality for you to wrap it up and move on? Because you can come back to it. I'm sure many of the doctoral students on this call may have also heard this. The best dissertation is a done dissertation. Was it good enough to get you through? You can always come back, because sometimes that dissertation is your lifelong work and you're going to come back to it. Sometimes it just needed to be done and maybe you'll never look at it again. So think about, is this good enough quality and can I move forward? It may not be 100%. 98 is good enough and I can move forward. The other one is a natural genius. So the natural genius, would say, if I were really smart, this would be effortless, is what the natural genius would say. And some of those traits for the natural genius is that they believe in born talent and skill. They believe that they were born with the greatness that they are. And they get frustrated easily and may quickly switch from one hobby to the next. Now, listen, I do that sometimes, like, oh, this was fun, but I gotta go. And that's fine. But when it's like, okay, I started with this hobby and I realized I'm not really good at it, so I just move on to the next and to the next and to the next, that might start becoming more of a problem. So look out for stuff like that. Then we have the rugged individualist. Now, the rugged individualist is the only would say to themselves, the only achievement that I really matter are the ones I got for myself. They would say, it's only me. I'm the only one that can do this. And so they sometimes will feel like they need more time for preparation. They'll say, nope, I don't want to work with anybody, no more group projects, no more group tasks. I just want to do solo projects. They will never ask for help, even if they need it. And it's okay to ask for help, right? And so one of the things, if you're feeling that you're an imposter in this space of a rugged individualist, is to ask for help. Finding ways to say, who are my top 5 people that I may ask for help if I need it? And it's okay to go and say, I need some support to one of those people. If you are the expert, you'd say to yourself, if I were actually smart, I'd know everything there is to know because I am an expert. And that is good. And I feel like in a PhD program, especially for my PhD students on the call, that might also be a mentality that you have because you're in a PhD, that you should know everything about everything. As someone who is almost halfway through there, sometimes I say to myself, I'm good knowing 80% of what I need to know at the moment. Everything else will come eventually. And so it's also for you to think about what are those tendencies for you as the expert to say, this has been really fun, this has been really good, but I need to move on. I think about that with books when I read them as well. You start reading a book and you just feel like, I got to read this book and the next book that's in the sequence. Oh, I read everything that's written by this one author because that's just what I have to do, because that's how I become an expert. But in reality, many authors end up repeating themselves over and over again. And so, especially if there's like 15 books that they've written, those 15 books may have a common thread through them. So think about, how do you read and apply and fully dive into what you need to, and then move on to something else. Because you can get to that point where you being an expert actually hinders your ability to finish something else that you started. And then the last one is a superhero. If I were really competent, I'll be able to do it all, right? And this is one of those spaces where a lot of graduate students fall into, that they are the superhero. Because not only am I reading 3 books a week, have a TA or a GA position, I'm also going to classes, I have a social life, I may have a partner, I may have kids, family obligations, there's a lot going on in life, right? And so one of the things to keep in mind is that we all love a good superhero. Batman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Catwoman, sometimes can be a superhero, can be a villain, just depends on who you ask. We all love a good superhero. The issues that sometimes arise is that one of the signs that you may be a superhero is that you are juggling multiple tasks at once, work, chores, school, side hustle, whatever it is, and then you start to realize that something is starting to fall through the cracks. But you're not realizing it because you think you're doing it so perfectly. Even though people might be saying to you, hey, Earl, this isn't going the way you want it to go, you may still think it is. One of the other things that you often might find yourself working overtime, you may also find yourself neglecting your friends and family and hobbies in order to work more. So it's also important as a superhero to then find ways to temper that superhero mindset and ensure that you're not taking more responsibilities than you're able to manage at a time. So that's all I'll say about this slide. I'll move forward. Here are other ways you can recognize imposter syndrome, right? There's again that feeling of self-doubt and feeling inadequacy. There's an inability to internalize accomplishments or deny your own success. When someone's trying to tell you did a great job, you're like, no, everything's fine, don't worry about it. I didn't do anything. Sometimes it's okay to just say thank you. There's attributing success to factors other than one's ability or intelligence, again, luck, an arrow. There's avoiding responsibilities. So sometimes as the imposter, people do not want to take on new responsibilities. They don't want a new job. They don't want to speak up in the meeting because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to submit to a conference. As well. I had a friend who had crippling imposter syndrome, particularly around conference presentation, because they feared being judged by others for their work. Never being satisfied with your own accomplishments. and also believing that one has fooled others into overestimating their abilities. So those coupled with everything I just said about the 5 different types, hopefully is helping folks paint a picture of what it means to be an imposter or have imposter syndrome, not what it means to be an imposter. So here's our reflection for you. What imposter thoughts were you able to identify in yourself while I was going through those slides? Why did you feel like a fraud? Was it something someone said or did? So think about those questions. I'll give folks about 30 seconds or so to think about that. Jot some of those ideas down for you to think about when was a time you may have been having imposter thoughts, and how is that affecting you and your work? Because it's most of the folks on this call are graduate students, I wanted to also talk briefly about how can imposter syndrome impact your career. People start to take jobs below their ability or aspirations is one way we sometimes see imposter syndrome show up in people's career. Because you don't want to take responsibilities at a higher level, you say, well, I'll just take this other job that is below my qualifications in order for me not to feel like being judged or any feelings of inadequacies. Folks who then leave academia, again, those internalized feelings that your success isn't based on your skills and qualifications. So you start saying, well, I don't feel like I'm doing great. Look at this other person. Maybe I should leave. Failing to seek advancements or promotion. You may maintain a low profile, not giving opinions or speaking up. You may avoid self-promotion. You may fail to negotiate. You start to aim lower. You may abandon dreams, leaving a school or a job, feeling unbalanced in your work and life. Those are all potential impacts that imposter syndrome can have on your career. I always like to show this slide about who we see based on the research is most prevalent to be impacted by imposter syndrome. Women who are in male-dominated fields, students of color on college campuses, those embarking on new challenges such as graduate school or a faculty position, and then careers that have subjective measures of success, like the creative arts. One of the researchers that I look at when I look at this work is a professor at the university, why am I blanking? Santa Clara University in California. And she says that imposterization refers to policies and practices and seemingly innocuous interactions in the workplace that may contribute to employees feeling like a fraud, triggering a fear that others will discover they do not belong. So with this quote, we're actually going to switch over and kind of focus on the structural or societal implications and impacts of imposter syndrome. So what Dr. Gutierrez here is talking about is that imposter syndrome and imposterization happens at the structural level, and it happens in a space where the policies and practices I've seen this innocuous interactions, which she's referring to here are microaggressions and biases in the workplace, may contribute to the employee feeling like a fraud. And so these are the different ways that structural factors can show up in the workplace, whether it's bias in our policies and practices. We can also see microaggressions where there's high job turnover, there's representation issues. Those are all structural factors to consider as we think about imposter syndrome and the cycle of imposter syndrome. Now I want to close out. My next two slides are indicating that some strategies for dealing with and breaking the cycle of imposter syndrome. One of the first things I want for folks to do is to be comfortable acknowledging your feelings by talking about them. Yeah, you sometimes need to name that behavior, right? So if you notice that you are doing something that may constitute imposter syndrome, it is good and it's okay for you to name that behavior. This is what imposter syndrome looks like to me right now. I'm going to name it. I keep telling people I'm not taking responsibility for how amazing I am, or I'm passing up on an opportunity to speak at a conference because I don't think I'm good enough. I'm trying to internalize that belief that I'm not good enough. Name the behavior. Challenge your doubts. You can challenge those that say that, no, this is right, I'm doing this, by recognizing your accomplishments. For example, you did it, you made it into grad school, you're here not because of some luck or some other external factor. You made it here because of your skills, intelligence, and qualifications. So what's next? What are you going to do next? How are you going to apply those skills, intelligence, and qualifications to what happens next? Accept recognition. Just simply say thank you. You don't need to qualify it. You don't need to qualify it. Oh, thank you, it was X. Thank you was this thing. Thank you was luck. No, just simply say thank you. Find a mentor or be a mentor. One of the most rewarding things for me has been to be mentors to others. I've really enjoyed just mentoring others, and it allows me to then not only see myself in them, but also see some of the things that I could have done better as I was also learning as well. It is a great opportunity to kind of see that. And then the last thing I'd say individually is to avoid comparing yourself to others. Person A is person A, person B is person B. We don't need to compare. Recognizing each other's differences and also adapting to each other's cultural practices is a wonderful thing. It shows cultural humility. It shows how you are developing from an intercultural way as well. So you don't need to be like, well, I'm going to compare myself to person A over here. No, they're on their own path. I'm on my path. Our paths may interact, but we're never going to need to compare ourselves to that person. And then structural strategies. Now, a lot goes on at institutional structures. One of the things I highly recommend folks to do is to examine standards or norms that create disadvantaged or marginalized employees or students. That is important and from a structural way to ensure that we break the cycle of imposter syndrome. When we create these biases, microaggressions, when we create these innocuous situations that Dr. Gutierrez talked about earlier in imposterization, then we are creating barriers that needs to be broken for imposter syndrome. I also recommend affirming employee contributions. When you're in your labs, when you're working on any projects, when you're talking to students, affirm people's contributions. That is one way that you can break the imposter syndrome cycle without even knowing. You don't even need to know that someone's going through imposter syndrome, but just by saying to them, you did a great job today, or wonderful work, this report was great. All of those things are really wonderful minor ways that we can affirm people's contribution. Embrace employees' authenticity. We always talk about we want the authentic you at work, so let's embrace it. Talk openly about imposter syndrome. I've been here for almost 2 years, and I think I've done this imposter syndrome talk about 4 or 5 times. And most of the times it with grad students, and it's wonderful because we're able to have that open dialogue about imposter syndrome. And the last thing I'll say is to normalize that feelings of inadequacy. Take time to onboard your staff members appropriately. Vulnerability and trust is important. For those who are familiar with Brené Brown's work, they're important to building a strong team. So that's all I have. I'll leave you with this quote so we can turn over to questions. This quote is from Rebecca Bastien, who also writes extensively on imposter syndrome. You can read her work on if you Google her. It says, the burden is not on people to fix themselves, but for the employers to fix the system that exacerbate the experience in marginalized and underrepresented employees. And I'd say the same thing. The burden is not on the people to fix themselves, the students to fix themselves, but it's also on us as staff members, as faculty, for those who are faculty on the call, to ensure that we are looking at the system that doesn't exacerbate the problems for those who are from marginalized background. So thank you, and that is all I have for today.
Thanks so much, Earl. I really appreciate being able to collaborate with you over ever since you've gotten here. So especially on this topic. So thank you so much. This ends the recorded portion of our session, and we'll open up to more general Q&A. For those of you that have to jump off, that's fine. Please just take a moment to take our survey. But again, I'll stop the recording, and thanks so much, Earl.